during this series that we've been doing together, it's all had to do with this idea of trying to see the big picture. And part of what holds you and I back in life is that we tend to not be a people that see the big picture. And part of that is our own humanity, that it's impossible to see the big picture of life because none of us can see even 1 second beyond now. And so one of the things that we've looked at and I've referred to more than once is this this poem. It comes from India, and you've probably heard it before, seen it, and if you've been in this series, we've talked about it. And it's basically 6 blind men, been blind since birth, and so they've never seen an elephant, but for whatever reason, they always wanted to know what an elephant was like, and so they find a place that has an elephant, and each one of them gropes along, and in their blindness, they come to the first part, of whatever they happen to be feeling on the elephant, and they make the assumption that this is what the elephant is like, based on the only part of the elephant that they're feeling. And so, one of them feels the tail of the elephant and says, well, an elephant is like a rope. That's exactly what an elephant is. And one of them feels the tusk, the sharp-pointed tusk, and says, well, an elephant's nothing more than just kind of a weird spear. And, one of them feels the trunk or the leg and says, well, elephant's like a big tree. And anyways, it's that type of thing where we've talked about the fact that there is this tendency that we have to just feel what is immediately ahead of us and make the assumptions that that's what everything is like. And so in this particular series, we've done different themes, and I've said sometimes we forget that God sees the whole picture. God sees the whole elephant, and we struggle because sometimes we wrongly judge God, and we say, well, God's not fair because this is going on, and so we make these wild assumptions. But God is a big picture God. God is seeing your whole life. He's seeing your whole picture all at once. And sometimes the things that don't make sense right now, God, as the song says, wants to hold you to get you to a better time where it does make more sense. But there's always this big picture. So we talked about trying to realize that God sees the big picture. He's a big picture God. In the second week, we talked about that there's even a bigger picture of you, perhaps, than what you realize. I told the story of a mom who was in a group of people who were all kind of introducing themselves, and they were introducing themselves based on their accomplishments in life and their degrees and where they work and all. And she's getting all nervous because she didn't work anywhere outside the home, and she didn't have degrees, and she hadn't invented anything, and so she kind of baffled, and just when it comes to her point, she just says, I'm sorry, but I'm just a mom. And we talked about how that is, she didn't realize it, but it's incredibly demeaning to ourselves when we put justa in front of anything that we say that we are. And we talked about that, for one thing, if all that you ever did was be a mom, that's like the greatest thing in the world. I mean, that's so awesome. And so you should never put justa in front of a mom or whatever it is that you do in life. Don't ever put justa in front of that, because you are a child of God, that God is He has a big picture for your life. And whether you're at work, I mean, you might just say, well, I just work in a factory. That's all. Well, come on. I mean, no, you are a child of God, and God intentionally has you there at this point in your life, and God wants to do things through you, whatever it is that you're doing and the way you're touching other people. So we talked about that there's most likely a much bigger picture of you than you realize. And then we also talked about that there's a bigger picture of God's church. then what we realize, so many churches are just content with just coming and doing church. And there's so much more of a picture than that. I mean, God, as we talked about in that message once, every church to be like creating new and creating good and creating life in this dark, dead world. I mean, talked about that every church should also be interested in restoring the mess that a lot of things that are in this world, a lot of mess that's happening in this world, that sometimes our job is just kind of bringing it back to zero where it was. And then we talked about that a church should be always wanting to illuminate Christ in the world. And so there's this huge picture that goes way beyond just showing up and singing some songs and going home. I mean, there's a big picture that God has. And then last week we talked about that God has this big heart for people. And he wants us to also have a big picture heart that goes beyond ourselves. It goes beyond just our immediate family. It goes to a world full of people that need the touch of God in their life and the touch of Christ. And he wants our heart to grow massively big toward this world that needs Jesus. So it's this idea again of, instead of just assuming that all it is just what we're immediately feeling in front of us, there's so much bigger things than that. And then I thought, you know what? As we head toward the end of this series, here's what I need to say. That it takes a big boldness if we're going to do any of these things. And if we're gonna see the big picture, that's one thing to see the big picture. It's another thing to do the big picture. And if you're going to do the big picture, like if you're going to try to see the big picture of God and then do the things that God wants you to do, or if you're going to see a bigger you than what you are, or if we're going to be a bigger church picture than what we are, or if you're going to really try to change the world and have a heart for people like God does, then there's going to be a certain amount of boldness that's going to be required that perhaps we lack. And you look at that picture and say, okay, boldness is one thing, but stupidity is another. And I chose this picture just because I kind of liked it, and it was under the heading of boldness. But I mean, I do want to say that boldness, when I talk about boldness in the context of how we're using it today, that there is a bigger picture of you within who you are that God wants you to be. There are certain things that we will never be able to do, and God's not expecting us to do that. Like I could never do this unless it was just straight out a miracle of God. I mean, if you look at my body, I am not like designed to do anything like that and work out. It's like got a real strong reaction on that. Look, there are certain things when I say bold, and actually when I get to the passage at the end that I really want to talk about, which is a big, bold passage, it's a big picture, it's a big living picture. When I get to that, I don't mean that God expects you to be able to do something you just can't possibly do within the scope of who you are as a person. But what I am saying is that there is a much bigger you and God and church and heart that is within our reach with God's help than what we're living. He wants and can enable us to be the biggest and boldest of who we are. That's where I'm heading. So I want to get eventually to a passage that's a big, bold life passage. And before I get there, I want to say what it is that the enemy does to keep us from that. Because there's something that the enemy is really good at that keeps us from seeing God as this big picture God that we can trust, and there's something that the enemy does that keeps us from being the big picture of who we need to be, and even our church from who we need to be, and from being a big picture heart toward the whole world. There's something that the devil is really good at, and I want to tell you what it is today. All right, so I'm going to try to cross my legs. I mean, not only can I not walk across a wire, but, I mean, this took a lot of faith. I was listening to a podcast, and this guy was saying that he got into an Uber taxi. And he noticed that the driver had a perfect 5-star review. You know, the comments and everything got 5 stars. And he was just amazed. He just said, "Man, you're doing a good job, dude. Way to go, 5 stars." And he got out of the vehicle and went walking on his way. And then he got looking more at the reviews. You know, you have them there on the app on your phone, and he got looking more, and he had only had 3 reviews. So he's thinking, well, okay, he only had like 3 reviews, so like a 5 star isn't that impressive because there's only 3 reviews. So then he gets into another Uber later on, and he notices another guy, he's got 5 stars. It's amazing, 5 stars. And then while he was in the vehicle, he looked at this guy's reviews, and he had 2,000 reviews, and he was a 5-star Uber driver. And he was so impressed. He like gave the guy an extra tip, and he like patted him on the back, and he said, "Way to go! That's awesome! Like 5-star review with 2,000 people reviewing you." And then as he got out of the car, he said, "And then I felt sorry for the guy, because sooner or later, somebody's going to give him a 2-star review." And his rating is going to suffer for that. I remember when eBay came out. Like, I'm a first-generation eBayer. I mean, I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And it's the first time that I remember the whole idea of rating and reviewing, you know, your service and what you do and how important that is. I mean, eBay, the whole thing is designed off of people's comments about one another and ratings and reviews, so that you know you can trust somebody when you sell something. And I remember getting my first, whatever their system is, I can't remember now, because I've like switched totally to Amazon Prime, you know. But whatever their rating is, like perfect. And it was so cool. I got a perfect rating, and they said, like, good seller, shipped fast, well packed package, whatever. And I'm thinking, man, that is so cool. And it made me want to do that again. And I got like well over 100 perfect reviews. So then somebody, I bought something off of somebody, and I had, you know, bought and sold stuff, but I bought something, and it was so bad. It was so well beyond what it was supposed to be, and everything about it was bad. Shipped late, packed wrong, not the description. And so I gave that person a bad rating. without thinking that they then would give me a bad rating. And so I got like my first 1-star rating or whatever it was. And my perfection rating came plummeting down. And it felt bad. And I'm thinking, you know what? This is so stupid. Because I am so concerned about my ratings and reviews on people that I'll never see. And still like 100 perfect rating, compared to 1 is great. And no one's not going to buy from me or not want me to buy something off them because it's 100 to 1. But it felt really bad, I must say. The things about reviews is that reviews are all over the map. Now, we live in a life, in a world now that is review crazy. We live in a world unlike any other time, I think, in history, where not only do people rate and review, but it's like we have a license to do that. We're encouraged to rate and review and to comment. I mean, it's just the way it is. And it's not all bad. But none of us wake up thinking, like, I can't wait for my review today. I can't wait to see how people are going to review me. But people, especially now, more than ever, we're review crazy. And my point is, I think it hurts our boldness. And I think the enemy has found a way, uniquely in our time, to actually keep us a little fearful of our next rating. Now, this is Patricia Barber, who is a very talented, skilled jazz musician. Very, good voice and plays beautifully. So I'm going to read you a review of her on this song, because everybody reviews, on wherever they're purchasing online. Here's a review from a guy named Tom Sanders, who nobody knows who that is, except Tom's mother or whatever, but I'm assuming. Anyway, Tom Sanders reviews this lady and says, I liked her voice, but I found the music, especially the instrumental arrangements, to be quite awful. They droned on in repetitive long stretches. Go ahead and bring that up. Let's just feel it. It reminded me, Tom says, of machine music rather than creative movement where ideas are explored. Often the music seems strange and without musical meaning. Listen carefully before ordering this. And if you are not familiar with her material, make sure you listen. But as for me, it's going straight to my trash pile. All right. See, the review tells us more about the reviewer than it does Patricia. And I want that to sink into your heart today. Okay? You and I have a lot of people commenting on us and reviewing on us and rating us. And sometimes there's truth in it. And again, not all the comments that we get are, even the bad ones, sometimes, we can find something that we can learn from. But oftentimes, the reviews that you get in life say more about the reviewer than they do you. For instance, the reviewer might not even like jazz. Tom may not even like jazz, but just stumbled upon it. Tom might be tone deaf for all we know. Seriously. Who knows? And Tom might be having a bad day. But Tom just wants to give a bad review because he's having a bad day and Tom doesn't care. So our responses on the reviews we get could be this: we can hide and stop trying because we got a bad review. And I'm not going to put myself out there again. I tried dating once and I, got treated so bad. I'm never going to date again. I tried working at this type of job that I always wanted, and I tried it, and the company was terrible, and I'm never going to do that again. Well, we can just hide, or we can become very average and just try to please everyone and hit the middle ground all the time so as to not really make people, have to go the extreme. We can kind of dumb it down. Listen, I spent a number of years in my ministry dumbing it down and not being who I am, being myself, because I didn't want bad reviews. I didn't want bad comments. And so I played it average so as to not get either side very upset. And I wasn't myself, and I wasn't happy, and not a whole lot got done. Or we could just come to the reality, and the reality is this, that there are going to be bad reviews on you. That guy with the perfect Uber record, sooner or later he's going to miss a turn, and he's going to get someone to that appointment a little late. Sooner or later he's going to meet up with a customer who there's no pleasing. Sooner or later he's going to get a bad review, and this is life. We get bad reviews and we get bad comments, and we just kind of have to say, well, okay, I'm going on, and I'm not going to hide. Now, here's how the evil one, I think, uses this against us, so that we don't get a big picture of who God is, and we're scared to really go with what God wants us to do, and we're scared to be the me, who we ought to be, and we're scared. Sometimes churches even get scared. Churches play it neutral. Churches play it average, so as to not lose whatever. Churches have played it average and played it in the middle for so long and don't take risks for so long. This is why 80% of them are dying. Or stagnant, which is the same. So here's a passage in 2 Timothy that's talking about the issue of fear, because it's fear that causes us to not really be the big picture anything that God wants us to be. It's fear. And do you know what the root of fear is? So much in these days, it's those ratings. It's those comments. And so 2 Timothy says, there is such thing as a spirit of fear. And the opposite of fear, and what God wants us to give us, is is power. There is a power in the Spirit of God as He lives in us that doesn't care what the comments say. I mean, we care, but we don't lose sleep over it. It's like, Tom's having a bad day. Tom's maybe doesn't get what I'm doing. Or this wasn't for Tom. And it says the opposite of the spirit of fear is love. And then in 1 John it says, you know, when we have this love relationship with God and we feel secure in God, it drives out fear. And the opposite of a spirit of fear is self-control, which is saying that when we are consumed with the spirit of fear, we are out of control. So, you know, I love doing word studies on these phrases. And as you study it, the spirit of fear, spirit means it's a pervading influence. And as you look at it, they give like little descriptions, and they'll say, you know what a pervading influence is? It's like you open up that bad carton of milk, or that bad carton of milk just has been there for a while, and the smell pervades the whole house, pervades room after room. Or pervading is like the fog that happened the other day that just is like, and it's just there, and it's just everywhere you go. And so there is this spirit of fear that some of you may be feeling right now that is just like fog that has moved into your soul. And it makes you out of control in terms of God controlling you. And my premise today is this is one of the tactics that Satan uses against us, is to give us a spirit of fear in this rating, comment-driven world we live in. I can't do this for God. We can't be the church we need to be. I can't be who I need to be because we might get a bad review. I remember the first time I saw this question. It was on one of those, like, I don't know, like, what do you want to do in life surveys. I'd never seen this question before. It's interesting. What would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail? And so the second observation I get from this is, isn't it obvious that whatever that is that you really want to do and you really want to attempt, you don't do because you're afraid of the review? What is it that God might really, a big picture God, really want to do in your life, but you can't seem to have the faith to do it because you're afraid of failing, and failing means a 2-star review? What is it that God wants you to be as a person that you just are so afraid to try because of the bad review? What is it that we want to do, we should do, God wants us to do as a church that we're afraid to do because of the possibility of failure? It's that whole review thing, and it's why we can't really see the big picture God. It's why we can't see the big picture you, the big picture church, the big picture art. Here's the passage that I was promising you earlier, because this is the big picture passage that God wants us to know and to learn and to live by, but it cannot happen unless we're willing to be bold. And that boldness cannot happen unless we are willing to get some bad reviews. And here is the passage. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, I'm not talking about me going on a high wire across the Grand Canyon. Because that's not, anyway, it's just not going to happen. What I am talking about is within my abilities of who God has made me, within my personality, there are even greater things that God wants to do in me and through me that I'm doing now if I trust God enough for His big picture. That's what I'm saying. And the same for you. I close with just this cool little video that's, I only show it to you because it's about a little girl who will never be able to do certain things in her life because of the limitations of her physically. She'll never be able to do certain things, but she is one who's not scared to be bold with living within who she is. So I'm going to ask the gentleman back there just to run a quick little video, just as a reminder that within who we are, just be as big as we can be.